So today we're going to be looking at Industry 4.0. And Industry 4.0 really is a combination of what it means to be human, how machines affect that, and how algorithms now shape just reality as we know it. So anytime we say tech, at least in Nigeria, sometimes we're thinking, or most times we're thinking software. But tech or technology is not just software. What we call technology is any combination of materials that facilitates industry. So technology is a facilitator for industry. And technology has always been the driving force behind industrial revolutions. So casting your mind back to Industry 1.0. So currently in the world we're in Industry 4.0, fully stepped in and potentially progressing towards Industry 5.0. But what do all these things mean? So Industry 1.0 starting in 1780s was driven by mechanical energy. So water, steam, and mechanical production that helped with just producing materials more easily and quickly. And then Industry 2.0 was the assembly line. So if you remember Ford cars and how that production was now systemized, that was technology as well. But the technology then was electrical engineering and just the idea of sequential production. Industry 3.0 was PLC, so your programmable logic control. And the drivers behind that was your electronics. So this is where the idea of technology as we come to know it today began to evolve. Now, Industry 4.0, where we are now, which started 2011, is this idea of combining the cyberspace with the physical space such that it's more difficult to find where the dividing line is. Now, Industry 5.0 is the future of just industry as we know it. And the idea of Industry 5.0 is the personalization of current technologies to the human being in one sense, but to specific applications in another sense. But for the purpose of this conversation, I decided to focus on Industry 4.0 because it gives the tools that you need to create personalization. So if you have no tools, there's no need to talk about personalizing anything. Now, when we talk about Industry 4.0, there are 9 core elements behind what we mean by Industry 4.0. So there's the popular one, AI, artificial intelligence. But artificial intelligence is just one of those elements, of those 9 elements that characterizes Industry 4.0. And don't forget what we said, that technology is the driver of industry. So there are 8 other components. So there's IoT, Internet of Things, where you embed physical systems with sensors, such that physical systems are now able to see, speak, move. So you also have cloud computing, which is, a more popular one, as well as big data analytics. Then there's robotics, which is empowering machinery with the functionality that has been previously perceived as human. Digital twin is another interesting one. It's the idea that you can take every physical system that exists in the world and cast a digital representation of such systems. So, for example, we've seen some futuristic energy systems where you have what is on ground and then you have a simulator, such that if there's something going wrong on ground, you can, in your simulator, find out what the best way to approach repairs are. So that's digital twin, and it has multiple uses across board, depending on your industry. There's augmented reality as well, which is more common when you're talking about this 3D immersive games, but it's beyond games. It's an immersion in a reality that is not physical, and that helps you make decisions just faster. Then there's cybersecurity, which I think is also a more popular one. And there's system integration, which is becoming much more important, actually, as we look across disruptions in supply chains. And then companies are looking to vertically integrate just because of geopolitical concerns. So all of this 9 elements, ranging from supply chains to additive manufacturing, all of these things is what is Industry 4.0. So when someone says, I want to go into tech, these are spaces that you could play in. Or if you have to advise a younger person on career options and the person says tech is not just software. This is just ground for so much possibility. So now this going forward is this interesting context, maybe I should say, of the third world. And what I've seen is that in talking about industry 4.0, and then in trying to help people in the third world, younger ones in the third world, gain access to this industry, I found that because there's a lack of baseline so far, it's just so much more difficult for people to play across all sectors. So the reason why, in this previous slide, the reason why some elements of Industry 4.0 are more popular than others, or more accessible than others, is because some of them don't require physical infrastructure. And then that limits you in the options that you have. So if a person was interested, if you're on the call, or if you had a younger person or even a child interested in tech and wondering what the future of their career could be, what might be ways to navigate this desire that you have, given the current geographical context? So the first thing I always advise is building in public. So building in public means that where you want to compete globally, because Industry 4.0 is regardless of geography, having a portfolio, even of non-perfectly done work, gives you competitive advantage. So that's the idea of building in public. Midterm, my advice is always global skilling. Now, global skilling is important because it helps you move away from those limits of your particular geography. Now, this is relevant just because we're speaking, in the third world with the constraints that we're all aware of. And then more long-term is to build expertise in your space. Now, building expertise is not something that anyone particularly can advise you on. It just comes from tinkering within the space you're in. So also just looking a bit more at what is possible, what the options are. Now, there's a recent report by the WEF called the Future of Work report 2025. So it predicts the future of work for the next 5 years, so 2025 to 2030. And there's this very sad paragraph that says that in the next 10 years, 1.2 billion people in emerging economies, that's just another word for third world, really. 1.2 billion people in emerging economies will become working age adults. But then the job markets in these economies are only expected to be able to create 420 million additional jobs. So over potentially 800 million youths in developing economies face economic uncertainty. And this is a reality in the context of Industry 4.0 evolving into Industry 5.0. So it's very sad that even though industry is global, so, in the sense that most people are able to access goods and services from all over the world, but one has to do more generally to break the barrier of just the world. So how to do this generally? Now, I understand that the people on this call, in this conversation, might not exactly be needing this. But one thing I know for sure is that just given the demography of just Nigeria, how that we have so many young people, there would definitely be at least 20 young people potentially reaching out to you for mentorship or reaching out to you just for advice. So what might you tell them about ways that they can participate in Industry 4.0 beyond the limits of current geography? So there are three core ways that I know because I've just been privileged to experience them and also just from samples as well that I've taken. So there are scholarships. So I know that in the age of Trump, it looks like there's been a reduction in funding for philanthropic purposes. But Industry 4.0 is not philanthropic. In fact, industry is self-preservation. So despite the fact that one might see a general reduction in funding availability, but just 2 years ago, it was passed into law. For example, it's called the CHIPS Act in the US, for example, that mandates a spending of, I think, about $500 million over the next 10 years to localize manufacturing of semiconductors and some other materials that the government had identified as critical to their national progress and industry. Industry is a word you'll keep hearing more and more as global order breaks down and people rely more on just physical things. So gold, just things you can really touch. So there are scholarships actually available for things around Industry 4.0. So there's also graduate assistantship. So where universities, in collaboration with industry, so different sectors of industry, are trying to break through to extend the usability of materials and just the ability that we can embed into physical systems. Now, also just looking more long term, there are also global talent visas. Just because we see when we look at the world broadly, we see that there's just a shift in demographic change with some countries getting older and some countries currently younger. So there's actually some of that opportunity. Now, the reason why this is important is because industry, like I said, is self-preservation of nations and of individuals. So one has to find a way to be present within all the components of industry. So I'll stop here for today. And I thank you so much for your time. I'm happy to take any questions, thoughts, comments, just anything. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Engineer Elizabeth Obode. That was a short but good one. I think the aim of today's class is to give us direction and to bring some people up to speed on what Industry 4.0 is all about, and giving us also hints about what Industry 5.0 is all about. Even though I had some ideas, but I like the way you put it and straight to the point now. Start looking at that, looking at the way you put it, the human, the bio, and the computer interrelation. So, and you said something too about personalization, which is key. This is one of the main aims of Industry 4.0 to democratize power. When it comes to tech. So that's a good one. Thank you so much. Please let's give her a digital applause. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So, please, the floor is open to questions. I think should be an interactive section that has given us a direction. As now is to stir up conversation. So please, if you have any question, signify by raising your hands and you'll be called to ask. Thank you. All
Awesome.
right.
So
Okay. So no, please go ahead, Engineer Elizabeth. I think you can. Yeah.
yes, same. So I put a document in the chat
Okay.
just to help us. And the reason why I created this document was because, I get a lot of people reaching out for just advice or what to do, things like that. And I think it's probably the same with many of us on the call. So what we see, and I'll just share screen again just to do a quick walkthrough of that. So what we see is that in the next 5 years, there'll be 170 million jobs that are going to be created, but 92 million will be lost, right? So, and the idea is that if there's someone reaching out to you for advice, mentorship, things like that, you can give them this guidebook as just some way to begin to think about what the future could look like for them. So there are some areas that are fastest growing in terms of just the opportunities present. Yeah, so we can see the usual suspects that we think about. So big data, AI, software, security specialists, things like that. We can also see light trucks or delivery services, as human interaction becomes more limited, you need a lot more middlemen. So we can see those as some areas growing. Now, the areas that are also declining, we can see that. So for example, if someone comes to tell you that, oh, they had desires to become a graphics designer, you can see already that that's not going to work out in the long term because that's a very rapidly declining area. So that's just something to note as a person. Now, this is the most, now all of this I'm getting is from this report just released maybe 2 months ago, a future of jobs report, World Economic Forum. Now, here is the net movement of roles. So, for example, it's interesting to see that chefs and cooks is a job role that's increasing in just the volume that's going to be required in the next 5 years. But accountants and auditors is a net decline. So petroleum engineering is neither increasing nor decreasing. So that might not be a great place to want to pitch your tent because then it's just the natural flow of industry that would make room for you. So, and then here is the potential of artificial intelligence to overrun or take over a job. So for example, while we know that AI, artificial intelligence, and big data analysts are growing, so it's actually the fastest growing job space in the world today. But there's the potential, very large potential. So the yellow color and deep yellow shows high capacity of being overtaken by artificial intelligence. So you see that that's not a space you want to be in, or whoever you're advising, that person needs to, when getting in, already begin to make an exit plan, just because there's a very high chance that artificial intelligence will be replacing that job role. So even marketing and media, for example, there are some components of that job that has very high replaceability, even programming, even multilingualism. So it's just an interesting way to give a balanced advice that yes, AI and big data engineers is the next big thing, but it's not going to be a big thing for long. So that whoever is going in is aware of the need for exit soon enough. So that's just the overview of the document I shared in the chat, and I hope it helps. Thank you.
Thank you so much, so much. So we have some of the people on the call that have questions. So let me start with Doreen. Emmanuel, please go ahead. You have the floor. Doreen, please. Yeah.
Hi, good afternoon.
Yeah.
Good evening. Elizabeth, thank you for such an insightful presentation. So my own is just basically concerned regarding this. It's something that I've been trying to like talk about for quite a while now with people that I know. One thing that I take note about the future of work and relating to Africa is that I don't think we're ready for the great shift even. Like I don't think we're ready. Apart from the fact that we don't have trainings, like the world is far, far ahead of us. Even basically, like um there's an article that I read a few weeks ago about well, we don't have skills, we don't have people that are ready to take on jobs, readily skills. And one of the experience also that I have with working with people in the Nigerian setting, except people that have quite worked for a while and decide to pay attention to this kind of thing, is that we that quick man thing, we have that mindset of that quick man thing. We don't pay attention to the little details. And these are things that are very important even in the global scale. Like you have to be paying attention to the little details. So my question to Elizabeth, what do you think we need right now? Because it's a step-by-step thing. We cannot jump from where we are right now to uh to the web. Sorry, I say web to the industry 4.0. What do you think are the necessary steps for us to put in place that would help us in the nearest future to at least, join the train?
So, Doreen, thank you so much for just expressing your concern and also the question. So I hear you when you say that, at least you read that there's a complaint about skill level, that difficulty in, or the lack of attention to detail. So this is a problem of geography as well. So it's very sad that a person's, because you don't choose the geography of birth, but yet you're limited to even the kind of information you get, even on the internet, varies by location. So the core thing that has to be, and also you said that we cannot just jump into Industry 4.0. But the problem the with industry is that it moves regardless. So it's just like when the trend of globalization came, regardless of whether you were prepared or not, it came anyway and left some losers in its wake. That's just a signature of industry. So what can be done can only be done on a national scale. But because it's so difficult for individuals to, at least the average individual, to influence that nationally, it's why I've put together this presentation speaking to the person, a person that knows that there is some limitation and wants to break out from that. So I believe that the best way to do this without a lever to pull in governance is just through things like this. So this kinds of mentorship, this kinds of one-on-one platform where you give knowledge, you tell people that these are the options and this is what you need to do just to become better. Now, I know that it's slow. It is generally not even my preferred way of doing things, but I've thought it better that even if 5 or 10 people know, potentially we can have a geometric progression of pulling people out of this mediocrity, because industry will not wait for anyone. It will just leave losers in its wake. So that's what I really believe, that we must educate as much as we can and find ways to begin to influence nationally. That's really what I think. Thank you, Doreen.
Okay.
So I see another hand up. Okay.
Yes, Adewumi, please, you have the floor. Sorry. Adewumi, please, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. I was trying to unmute. I think it was saying the host. Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Elizabeth, thank you so much for the
Yes.
presentation. That was I think that was for thinking, because we need to have these conversations to prepare most of us for what is coming ahead. So one thing I wanted to ask is did you stumble on the risks involved, right? Because of course, in any endeavor, there is always a risk attached. You understand? So my question is like, what are the risks that is attached to this maturity, either in an industrial scale or in a personal scale, in a governance scale, in terms of governance? What are the risks? Because one thing I know is that I always tell people that, of course, Industry 4.0 didn't just start as a Big Bang theory. It started from digitization, then digitalization, because that's a process, then transformation, digital transformation, then you now get your. So it is an industry that has matured, that will now embrace Industry 4.0 fully. And another mix to it is that when you were talking about people trying to, I actually like that report that you dropped about people taking advantage or leveraging, right? I always tell people that if you are a bad programmer, you are going to be a bad AI user. How do I mean? Because these things they are data models, and they are large LLMs. They are loaded, and they need someone to speak to them. You understand? And that's why we encourage people to, if you want to enhance AI, if you want to use AI for your day-to-day, your BAUs or whatever, right? You need to also be a very good prompt engineer, which means you have to speak to the AI in a language it speaks, right? It's still like garbage in. Yes, we have smarter ones. We have agentic AI now, but it still rests on the fact that you are actually a good prompter, someone who can craft something that even makes the AI to think, right? But if you are just surface, just random, you will still struggle. You won't get, and the AI will not learn. You understand? So let me go back to the risk. What are the risks that you see could emerge in the usage in this transformation? And putting it at the back of our mind, Africa, because as the first person spoke, we are actually backward. We we can't even argue that we are actually backward. But what are the risks involved in, even personally, we leveraging on these things here? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adewumi. So if I understand you correctly, you want to know the risk of adoption of Industry 4.0 on the personal level and on governance level. So risk comes from not adopting, right? So the current context of the world is such that even if you want to be left alone, you don't want to participate in anything, you have to be powerful enough just to be left alone. So if a choice of non-participation is a choice to lose. And that has been like I said, that has been the signature of industry and of industrial evolution. So just like you said, the industry evolved digitalization, and then there was transformation before we now have this cyber-physical engagement. If there was a country, for example, or even a person that chose to be exempt from digital, digitalization, and now and in the future, cyber physical systems interaction, what might that person contribute to the world, or what might that nation contribute to the world? There is the tendency to think that nations can remain stagnant, but that's the problem with entropy. It causes even stagnancy to retrogress. So the risk I see is the risk of non-participation. So much so that if you want to be left alone, you have to be a leader in that space. You have to lead the trend. That's really the risk I see. So the risk of non-participation. So on a personal level, yes, there's some risk of either embracing Industry 4.0 or not embracing it. So on personal level, not embracing it just means that you jog very quickly towards relegation. But if that's your aim, that's okay. Then you've won based on personal metrics. But if your aim is relevance in the world, or just a way to communicate with language and tools that are understandable by your generation, then there's no way to not be present in this. Now, also on a personal level, if you're even involved in the use of some of these tools, what happens is that as artificial intelligence gets more intelligent, there's the probability that some of the skill set you're taking time to build goes into obsolescence. So, and this is why there's need to show the balance. So yes, there's a growing pool of big data and artificial intelligence requirements, but in the next 5 years after this phase, that artificial intelligence is going to take over those roles. So the person has to be aware of the skills they're building and the probability of obsolescence. So that's on a personal level. Now, the risk on a governance level is, in Africa, we see the tail end of non-participation. So the previous geopolitical trend was globalization. So the previous geopolitical trend was globalization. And then because the continent refused or was unable to participate, we see the tail end of those risks now, what we call, in general terms, backwardness. Because it's the nature of human beings and of nations to compete, to be better. And the problem is that, like I said, if you choose not to compete, it's a choice to lose. So governance as well, the risk that I see, the key risk is in non-participation. So that's the key risk I see. So I hope I've been able to answer that. So I see there's one more hand up, please.
Well, Mr. Ibrahim, sir.
Yeah, Elizabeth, thank you very, very much. So I'm coming at it from the here and now, right? So we have what would say, if you recall, during Alex Ado's presentation, he asked, why not agriculture? Why not energy? I mean, based on your experience, why or does Industry 4.0 affect, food and agriculture industrialization? And how does that work as an alternative, as a strategic alternative or an option on the path of growth and development? Instead of fully diving into tech, how do we leverage what Industry 4.0 is and is doing into things like agricultural development, mechanization, precision agriculture, from a strategic point of view now? Because from the list of jobs you mentioned about going obsolete, I didn't notice any food or agriculture-based ones there. So can you speak a bit to that? Thank you.
Yes, awesome, Ibrahim. And that's really great. This question and perspective. So yes, you're right, actually, that food and food-related systems. So when you look at the food chain, the food supply chain in the world of a nation, yes, you have the planting, the part of that process that is closest to the ground. You have the part that interacts with machines, and you have the part that the human being, as the end consumer, interacts with, right? Those are the three key blocks of the food supply chain generally. So Industry 4.0 across various elements will affect that middle block, that part of that food supply system where the machines and the food interacts with more critically. But there's been some interesting changes, or there's been some interesting trends, let me just put it that way, in the way the human being and their food now interact. And this is why you see that there is, in the future of work, there's actually a growing number of requirements for chefs. So people that can sort of manipulate food in such a way that it leads to holistic wellness. So there's that growing trend generally in this food industry. So in terms of a strategic direction for the nation, food alone for a country is not going to be enough. In my point of view, food alone is not going to be enough to place a nation, or food alone for a nation is not going to be enough to put that nation at a competitive edge. Now, if a country decides to become the hub of food production for the world, that now becomes strategic. That is different. But just feeding yourself alone as a country, I don't see how that can replace this move, this 9 elements of Industry 4.0. So Industry 4.0 elements will instead augment your desire to be self-sufficient as a nation and potentially drive your strategy to be the food hub for the world. That I see as more strategic, and this is my perception of this. So I hope that answered the question, but if not, you could clarify again.
Okay. So to clarify and shed further light, right?
Yeah.
So we hear of nations that became industrialized by first leaning into agriculture and getting the food, the revenue from stuff like that. Then when they became sufficient, they now channeled the funds raised from that into tech or digitalization and all that. Nigeria's approach, I'm not sure if strategically we are looking at it in that light. We seem to be, for instance, if you're looking for funding, it's easier to get for fintech, it's easier to get for software houses, those kind of things. Not that it is easy, but it's easier than saying, you know, I'm about to start a dairy farm, or I'm about to go into meat production, or I'm about to export hides, or any of these related things. So I'm asking from the strategic point of view, what would be the best path forward? And are we already choosing that? Or if not, what would your...
Okay, so that's very interesting. And it's very interesting that you mentioned that it's easier to access funding for fintech or data analytics. It's because funding is not geography neutral. So there's funding, and most of this funding that you speak of is accessed globally. So it's actually not the national economy that supports this move, this funding into, say, fintech or data analytics, things like that. It's external funding that cares about industry. So Industry 4.0 in this particular case, that cares about industry that is regardless of geographical boundaries. Now, there's another kind of investment, the patient kind, that makes a nation better. that kind of investment is done by government or people interested in making that nation better. That kind of investment doesn't come up when we talk about Industry 4.0 because industry in general cares a lot more about profitability and the ability to reach markets without boundaries. Now, this is why in the course of this conversation, I've shown that, and this presentation is tailored to what the individual can do, or what an individual, maybe such as yourself with mentees, can advise. Because that's the funding, your mentee will be better positioned to access funding for their fintech or AI startup as opposed to agriculture. Because agriculture in the nation is to feed the nation. That will never be seen as strategic by anyone else outside the nation. So this is the dichotomy that exists in looking at systems from a global perspective. It's a bit cold, it's a bit cold. And this is why government and regulators usually come in to protect their people or to limit the reach. But where that is not present, you now find that you have to compete on, this other side of that equation. And it's just like you said, you can get more easy funding for elements, anything growing. Once you look at that future of jobs report, anything growing on that report, you potentially will get more funding for it. Anything not growing or growing that has geographical limitations like farming, you'll be very hard pressed to get funding for that. So that's the cold world, of industry as a whole. So yeah, that's it. I hope I've answered now more clearly. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. I don't want to be left out in the questions and contribution. So I'd like to make some few points and I've listened to you very well. I've learned some things, some strategic things that will help my decision making. And I've also listened to our other participants who asked questions and contributions. So I'd like to say this. I think our mindset matters a lot as a people. Our mindset matters a lot. There's a lot we can achieve as a people, but we need to have the right mindset. I don't like the word backward. When we say we are backward, I don't think so. We might not be catching up, but we are not backward. When she said that, I just immediately went to the internet and checked some things. Maybe we should just dissect our issues more to be able to understand where we stand, our strengths and weaknesses. Do you believe that 70% of Nigerians are using generative AI? 70% of the people online. And that surpasses the average of 48% of people in the world. 70%. So if you talk about usage of technology, I think Nigerians are one of the best. I don't know if anybody's going to disagree with me on that. When you talk about cars, flashy things, technology, computers, we are some of the best users in the world. When it comes to the crypto scene, which of blockchain, AI, or whatever, the crypto scene, if you won't believe this, Nigeria is the second after United States for the number of users. The number out of the 500 million people have forgotten our own, so we should just look at our problems. So maybe for usage, yeah, we're good. Maybe for development, we are not super good. But I can still say there are some gains there. So why can't we look at it holistically, then build, look at our weaknesses, try to structure it, then also build our strengths? Because if we keep saying we are backward, we will take ourselves backward. But if we look at it holistically, look at the strengths, we'll be able to build on that. I just saw something too now, because I've been following the guy. There's a guy called, let me check his name again. Saeed Aziz is a student of mechanical engineering at the University of Lagos. Said they have successfully built text-to-speech AI model, which reads out text in clear Nigerian accents called Yan GPT. Who knows about that? Nobody knows about it because nobody cares to know. So we have some development. We've had super people, Saeed, yourself, Alex on the board. These guys are great AI people, across the world, known across the world. So I think our mindset should change about our country. We should not always look at ourselves as backward. We should build on. I'm not saying that we are there. Of course, we are still trying to catch up, but I would not like the word backward. I think we should just help ourselves in that area. And we should learn to patronize our own, even as bad as it is. We patronize. When we patronize, we can give feedbacks, and keep improving that technology. So another thing, how we can catch up more, because I like what you showed us your plans on how to go into the industry or be part of the industry 4.0. So and that's one of the things we're doing to ensure that there's adequate training, awareness about this thing, bringing people like you who are internationally known to come and train us. Because in your plans, you mentioned build in public, that's build a portfolio. In a layman, I would like to see that as having a vision of what you want to be. In this sense now, Industry 4.0, AI, adoption and all that. Then he said the next thing is global skilling, which is one of the things we are doing now. We put it out, but how many people are here? I'm just saying. So you said something, Industry 4.0 will not wait for anybody. There'll be winners and losers. So it's better we ensure that we align to be winners. And you made that analysis, sorry, the numbers. You said out of the 1.2 billion people in the emerging economies that will become working adults, only 420 have something at some level of certainty. Others are uncertain. So that is there. So it's one of our duties as professionals to keep pushing the word out, creating awareness, not looking at if we look backward or not. We keep pushing. Anytime we want to identify a problem, we should think of solution. We should not stay, magnifying that problem. We should think of solution. And I think with that kind of mindset, we'll go forward. And I also say that AI, like I think Adewumi said, he said, talk about prompt engineering. I think that's one of the key things now. You can't say about what you know now as a person that I read in books and all that. It's about how you can generate information now with your prompts, And that entails critical reasoning, critical thinking. And I think I saw it as part of the skills that are still going to be very useful in the future. Critical thinking. How to, he said something, he said, give the AI prompts that will make the AI think. And I think those kind of things, are there. So, okay. And the last one about the agriculture that, Stebri mentioned about, and you're talking about, I think there's a lot of, application use cases in agriculture, looking at smart farming or agriculture using sensors, using sensors and AI for predictive, farming, or give the farmers more good information for better decision making. I think one of our problems too is not knowing some people that are trying to come into farming now, knowing the best time season for farming, kind of soil. I think AI can help to fast track that area. So I believe there's a lot of applications that can even start at the individual level before looking at the national. I keep telling people something. When you look at the GDP of any country, I've looked at many countries in the world, the GDP, America, UK, Nigeria itself, 75% is by small businesses, mostly owned by families. So I'm just saying individuals have a major role to play when it comes to national development. And so I'm just saying all this to align with what you've also shown us today, and just to also encourage our members on the call that the mindset matters a lot, and there are a lot of applications of Industry 4.0 around us. So thank you so much again for that. I don't know if you want to add to that before we end this section.
And Oliver, thank you, Engineer Oliver, thank you so much for just your contribution. And I think it's always great to be reminded to be optimistic, about the prospects. But it's, I guess, very difficult to do that. That's when you sit with the data, but it's great to be reminded of that. So thank you so much for your contributions.